Hello, everyone, and welcome to What to See with Val. It is the tail end of the Sundance Film Festival. Thank you so much for checking out all of my interviews this week. And if you saw my reviews today on Good Things Utah, you're going to know what I'm talking about today because I reviewed the movie that we're about to talk about. And I'm very excited to have Jeff Russo, who is a composer, songwriter, and music producer. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. Sundance, we're almost over. It's the last weekend. It's Friday, and I have kind of been doing a whole music interview section this week because I think music is very important to filmmaking. I also interviewed the director of Eno. So we got into music in that because it's all about music.
Yeah.
But your aspect of your job and what you do with music is try to tell a story along with the story that's being told visually.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most important part of the score is to support the storytelling, right? Is to help guide the audience in terms of emotional constructs and guide them in terms of how the tone and the feel of the movie is from an oral perspective. And I think that, certainly scores can make or break a movie. I think a great movie with a great score is the perfect combination. And I think that it's important to understand that every project has a different type of material, like a different type of concept in terms of how music will affect the narrative. And from as far to one side as no score to the other side of just wall-to-wall score, I think it all can be very meaningful.
Well, and I'm going to throw some of those projects out there. You worked on TV series Fargo, Snowfall. Some of my friends are going to super geek out and message me in a minute. Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Strange New World, and one of my favorite new series, For All Mankind. Wow. So these are all very special and emotional scores for people because when you're watching a series, once you turn that on and you're watching it, you immediately feel like you're in the right place. When you watch something like The Sopranos or Star Trek Picard, once you hear that song, wherever you hear it, you know where you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of what I do is to try to connect the audience with characters or connect the audience with a certain, geographical location and or idea, some sort of idea. With For All Mankind, it was, trying to connect the audience with the idea of what was happening, the idea that the Russians had beat us to the moon, and then what happens after that. And now that this whole different history has been created, how to keep people connected to the characters and to the story. And I think that goes for all those projects that you were talking about, and even more so for films. I think that in a film, you have to try to get to that connection quicker than in a television show because you only have 90 minutes or 2 hours or however long you have, whereas on a television show, with Fargo I have 10 hours. With For All Mankind, it's basically now it's been 40 hours because
oh my gosh.
So that's what I mean. Like I can continually with television, I can continually tweak and continually adjust how characters are connecting with the audience and vice versa. With a film, it's like you just have one shot. You really got to get in and get out really fast and make it really count.
Well, let's jump into film really quick because this is why we're here. We're talking about Rob Peace today. It's one of my top 10 movies at Sundance, so I'll throw that out there. I usually don't give the score of the movie until the end or hardly at all to filmmakers that I'm interviewing because sometimes, they're not all the way always the best.
Sure.
But I did pick for my recap to talk on ABC. This was one of the 4 movies I talked about. And for me, I think it's one of those movies that once you jump into it, it could go one way or the other because it's a biopic. It is based on a true story. And sometimes when you get into that, it doesn't always work. But from the minute the title credits come on and that hip hop song comes in, I jumped back to high school and where this music was, and it immediately brought me to where I'm supposed to be. So let's talk about the choices of the music and the score in Rob Peace.
Sure. A lot of what we tried to do with it, with this particular piece, was to keep it very grounded, right? We didn't want to lead the audience around. I think that the choices of songs, which really rest in the hands of our music supervisor and director, it was really important to make sure that the audience was right there with us in terms of the time of when it was taking place, because we really did want to give a sense of the whole scope of the story and how it happened across the time from when Rob was 7 years old to when he had left college. So a lot of those songs that were chosen certainly help with placing the audience in the right time zone. You know what I mean? And also the feeling of the time and like where this person was spending their time, in Jersey and then at college and then back. It was really important to sort of hit the target on what was happening at the time.
So when those songs are chosen, let's say, the music director and the director come, are you composing before you know what songs they're choosing? Or in this film, did they kind of say, this is kind of our vision, and then you work within it? How does that work between the composer and the music director?
Well, it definitely works both ways. In this particular case, they had a lot of the songs chosen, and then some couldn't make it into the movie. So a lot of times I knew that the opening song was originally the opening song was going to be a Prince song.
Oh.
And we ended up not being able to use it on a number of different levels. It really didn't work. When you pick a song that's as famous as the song that we were going to use, it also can take the audience out of it. And that was the first cut that I saw. And then I saw a cut that had the song that you saw. And it certainly made more sense to me. Generally speaking, I'm writing score in a bubble, right? Like I'm writing score and they're choosing songs, and then we sort of come together. And if it doesn't work, I'm usually the one to fix things, because I can make changes and make editorial changes, compositional changes in order to have something work. But generally speaking, we have an idea of how we want the whole music piece to feel together, like songs and score, and how they're going to go into one another and out of one another. And a lot of times in this particular project, I would write music into a piece of music, into a song, and then as the song is ending, I'm coming out. There's score on the other side of it. So it really happens in so many different ways. There's not one answer to that.
Now, I do feel like sometimes a composer is very much an actor as well, because you are given this script and you have a handful of characters and you're trying to set a tone for each character on screen. And there were 3 very powerful characters in this film. Chiwetel Ejiofor, he directed, he wrote the screenplay. He's also in the film. And then you have our main character, Rob Peace. And then you have a secondary powerful, I think she's just as powerful as your main character, but you have Mary J. Blige playing his mom, which plays a very intricate part of this story. And I love how she never apologizes for her commitment to being a mom. And so when you're reading through these characters, do you pull inspiration about how you feel about each one, and then you kind of put that together go over how you match the story and characters with your music.
That's an interesting question. I would say that I usually look to a character to find their emotional core, and then that's the thing that I try to take inspiration from when writing. So when writing Mary's character, it was really about her emotional strength and me trying to underline that part of her resolve, and how all that mattered to her was that Rob succeed, right? Rob succeed as a human. Rob get all of the opportunity that she could afford him, and I needed to underscore that. Chiwetel's character obviously was very two-sided, and I one of the things we didn't want to do was be too on the nose with the whole idea of the score. We wanted to be gentle with pushing on the narrative, but we really did want there to be some depth and some heft to it, because although it is a tragedy in the end, what you really want to look at is you really want to look at the joy that was experienced, and the hope, mainly the hope that was experienced. And like, that's a pretty thrilling aspect to the movie, that and I wanted to underscore that emotionally. I wanted to underscore the hope in the film and not the tragedy in the film, because we all know what's going to happen. We know where it's leading, since it's a true story and this is based on a book, and it's no secret what happened to Rob. But what you don't know going into this film is the feeling of hope that it conveys, and the feeling of joy that it conveys in the joy of parenting. And yes, it is such a terrible tragedy at the end, but the road there, which is obviously littered with a lot of obstacles, still has these really powerfully joyous moments when he meets Naya, and when he is succeeding at school, and the feeling of that success is what I wanted to sort of grab onto. That first time we see him at Yale is such a powerful moment, and it needed to be sort of joyous in nature, and not not sort of too emotionally heavy.
Well, let's go into, I'd like to talk about two of the scenes that really pop out in my mind when it comes to two different sides of the spectrum of making us feel something. One of them, we'll go to the bright spot first, but when he is completely re-renovating the town that he lives in and the street that he lives on, and they're pulling apart houses, but then he walks out into the bright street, because now it's bright, where before it was very kind of rainy and watery colors, and dark. But he's in a suit now, and he's walking down the street, and there's signs up everywhere, and it just uplifts the whole audience. And then you have a scene where he's a young kid and he's sitting out on the stoop of his house watching the puddles go by. So if you can kind of describe these two scenes for me, and what your thoughts were about putting the music to those.
Well, it's interesting. So the first scene that you're talking about, when what we're seeing is the realization of his dream, and his feeling of accomplishing that and getting there, because he had always just wanted to bring, positivity and positive energy and a forward motion to his community, and pull it out of the urban blight that had happened. And he thought, like, with his intelligence and what he had learned at school, and all of these things that he could do that. And he was really accomplishing that. And for me, there was still the added sort of negativity of the weight of his father on him. And I have to balance that there. I really have to balance that. So the most important part of that for me was sort of playing into the accomplishment, the sense of I've, done something that I wanted to do, and I'm continuing to do that, and to sort of give the entire visual of that, like that same sort of uplifting feeling. You know, with the scene where young Rob is sitting on the stoop looking at the rain, and what you're neglecting to talk about also is the fact that it is his mom who sees him
Yeah.
through you know, through the window, and there's a melancholy there. But I tried to play mom's hope as opposed to Rob's melancholy, because we all know that feeling. We all know that feeling of sitting in your room or on your stoop or whatever on a Sunday afternoon, and it's raining, and you feel that overwhelming sense of melancholy. I think that that's a very universal feeling, and I didn't want to play directly to that, because what we really are looking at is we're really looking at mom, you know, believing that he can be better than the rest, that he can, you know, overcome the downside of his surroundings. And I wanted to play into that hope. I wanted to play into that sort of uplifting feeling as opposed to the melancholy.
I love that. And that scene gets played a few times in the film at a couple of key moments to help you really reflect on why he remembers that moment. And then when we see that moment towards the end of the film, which I'm not going to give it away, it's from a totally different perspective.
Sure.
And it's just so powerful how that happens. I feel like this is, and I hope you don't take this in the wrong way, but it's kind of one of those quiet films. It's not a movie that has explosions. It's not a movie that is in your face. It's not a movie that's shoving anything down your throat. It is this quiet movie about a topic that shouldn't be quiet, that we need to talk about, but it feels so familiar, and it feels, I don't want to say welcoming, but it pulls you in. And I think it's the music, and it's that editing cadence that moves along with the music that really just kind of keeps pulling you in to feel like you are a part of something that's happening, instead of just me sitting in a chair for the 15th time this week and watching a film.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, and I really appreciate that. The idea was to keep it intimate. The idea was to keep it so the audience really connected with the story and with Rob. Pulling you in that was what I wanted to do. So instead of having big cinema, in terms of the score, it was really more about wanting it to feel like you were in the room. You know, I wanted you to feel like you were right there with it. So it didn't need to be this big orchestral sound. I wanted it to be a much sort of more intimate piece.
And I think that with this story, it makes it much more believable. I understand that it's a biopic, but I always tell my audience, whether it's a biopic or a documentary, if it's done right, it should trigger you when you're done with the film to go learn more about the story.
Sure.
And when it's done correctly, because what you see on the screen is not the full truth of what has happened in real life. And so I definitely think this fits that perfectly. And because I did not read the book, and when you get online and you start looking into the story and all the different facets of the pieces that come into Rob's life, there's no way you could tell all of that in the time frame that you had. And so you have to pick and choose those moments. Are you ever in on that? Is it, you said that a couple of songs were cut here and there. When you're thinking about what has been chosen, is it you with the director and some other people, and you're just kind of playing things and you're all kind of figuring it out? Or do you come with some things and then you kind of feel it out together?
Well, actually, what happens is, in this particular case, Chiwetel and I and Alex Kurtzman, who was one of the producers, watched the film. And then we would decide where we think music should go, where we think score should be. And once that is done, we talk about, and as we're talking about where, we're also talking about the tone and the feeling of it. And then I go back to my studio and I sit by myself and just write and continue to write, while watching the picture and then editing it and then sort of feeling, how things are going to come in and out. And then I present it to Chiwetel, and then Chiwetel then gives me notes and like says, this is great, or, this is really good, but can we do a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that? This is feeling a little too over the top. Can we make, there's a million and one things. And then I take it back, sort of do all those notes. And we get to a point where we have this back and forth, where we're both talking about what our ideas are and how to achieve those ideas through music. And that's a back and forth process that goes back and forth a few times before we get to a place where everybody's like, oh yeah, this is great. This is working now.
Nice. Well, let's talk about those quiet moments for a minute. As you're sitting there with the director and the producer and you're watching the film and you're deciding where there isn't going to be music, because the lack of music and the music, just like the lack of dialogue and then a bunch of dialogue, is very important to setting the mood in a film. So can you tell me like one moment from the film where all three of you decided, this is a moment where the scene needs to speak for itself?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of those moments, so there was the moment where we pull back from the building and it's revealed the whole murder thing had happened. This is the very beginning of the film. And we could have very easily like put a lot of music in there. And, my idea was very much like, you really just want to hear the sounds of the street. You really want to hear that to pull you in so an audience leans in, as opposed to like, yeah, we can put some tension music in, and I don't know that that's going to really help us. I think that's going to be fine, but I don't know that it's really going to pull the emotion out in the scene. And when we watched it the way I suggested, everybody was like, oh yeah, that works. That works really well. There was a couple of other moments like that. There was a moment when Naya and Rob are dancing, and there's a song, and it sort of transitions to score, and I needed there to be a breath of just the two of them for a moment. So I added a little bit of a moment of silent, no music. And what I have always said to filmmakers is that a score is only as important as the silence that precedes it, right? So if there isn't silence preceding a score, then the score is not going to have nearly the same effect than it has when there's a long pause and then music comes in, or where there is music and then we pull music out and then there's silence. I think that those moments are always more impactful than when you just have a lot of music playing over emotional scenes. That's when it gets to be melodrama. And I think that we didn't make a melodrama. I think we made a character piece, and it's really about the characters. So I needed to make it so that the music really, really tipped its hat to that.
Well, I agree. There were so many moments that led to so many different emotions in this film. I will tell people, like, bring your tissues. You are going to laugh too. There are going to be suspenseful moments, but the story and the way it's presented leads you to go through a bunch of different emotions. Before we are done today, and I know not everybody likes to pick favorites, but was there one piece in this film that when you saw it match up, to the scene, that you were like, that really hit you hard as a composer? Like,
well, there's two. There's actually two. I mean, I don't have a favorite piece, I would say, but there are two musical moments where I really felt like, oh, okay, I feel that emotional connection. Actually, there was one other that was taken out of the film. The entire scene was taken out of the film. So because the scene never existed in the film, the piece of music never existed. But there's a montage at St. Benedict's where they're swimming, and you sort of get the idea that he's really becoming a part of this community, and that was a big musical moment for me. And then of course the final scene where we've been running through this entire long scene. Then we finally get to the very end and Mary walks out onto the beach. That whole moment where you start to really understand what has happened.
Yeah.
And the breadth and gravity of the whole thing, like that piece of music combined with the picture and like what was happening was very moving to me as well. So, you know, those are the two that I would say.
Well,
Yeah.
I agree as well. That last scene, man, you know, it's one of those that if you've ever lost anyone, it will take you directly there when you kind of had that moment of closure to say goodbye. So like it hit me hard. It still hits me a little. I'm gonna tear up a little bit, but you know, congratulations on the film with you and the rest of, you know, the filmmakers. The cast was just amazing cast for this film. It was right on point. I do want to say, those of you that are watching, there's still another chance to see this film at Sundance tomorrow. So get on the Sundance app. And if it says sold out, go on the wait list. You never know. And this is definitely one you're going to want to see on the big screen. I will also keep you, you know, up to date when it gets picked up and then it comes out for a full release, which you know, I don't want to, I'm going to knock on wood, but I have super high hopes for this film in 2024. Thank you so much. And I just want to say, you know, what do you have coming up? Right? Is your brain anywhere else yet? Are you still like, I feel like you have so many things, but do you have anything new we should keep our eyes out for?
Yeah, on April 4th, a mini series or a limited series comes to Netflix called Ripley. And that's based on the talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah.
And I wrote the score for that, and that was really incredible work, really incredible piece. And that is something you should check out.
Definitely. That is already on my list. When the studios send me stuff, I'm like, check. And
Yeah.
I want all of you to put Rob Peace on your list. Thank you so much. Make sure you guys check out the other interviews that I have here at Sundance. And let me know once you see Rob Peace what you think about this film. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks very much.